dealing with this. All right, so we're finally my heart was set on an Insta live, but we're doing this instead, and that's okay. So we have Mitchelle Greenaway with us today. She has two organizations. I actually want to ask you, Mitchelle, what I mean, I know I did have a look. Jigsaw works with vulnerable communities and especially young people. And then there's REM Wellbeing. What is that about, REM Wellbeing?
So REM is basically it's an acronym. So it's reflection, empathy, moving forward, and it's just different elements to helping create change and helping support with change. So it's just things that the journey kind of process provides, like a space of reflection. You will get empathy, and it's hopefully a kind of then steering to moving forward in your life.
Okay,
So they're
lovely.
all kind of things that I provide, but you provide for yourself in that space. Yeah.
Lovely. Lovely. So do you generally use this modality a lot when you're working with your clients? And does that benefit them? Does that, what's the response like?
Yeah, I think one of the things in this kind of space is how powerful every individual is for themselves. And it's not that anyone in like my position or anyone that's providing support, it's not our place to come in and say that we're fixing people or we're the ones doing the work. Actually, it's within the individual that comes to us for support. So then they're just tools that if the individual can have for themselves, like reflection, I'll provide the empathy, but the empathy for themselves as well. I think empathy is something that um it's such a powerful space to kind of help build reflection. And within those kind of like within that process, you can find that how you can then create change for yourself. So I do use those modalities because it's not really about what I do, it's about what the person does.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
empathy is so important when working with marginalized communities as well. So
Mm,
I'm Asian descent and everything. So I do uh, have in my work, in my practice, and just generally as well in my interactions, learn the importance of empathy when it comes to dealing with people who come from different languages, backgrounds, cultures, because they come with a completely different set of experiences. And so that really helps. And by the way, this is also the topic we're going to talk about today because I don't want to take too much of your time as well. You do have a busy day ahead planned, and I'm so glad that you're finally doing this, though. We wanted to talk about, and we've been planning to talk about perfectionism and how that especially impacts young people today. Sort of like a pressure cooker situation that most young people have going on. And it's not like, of course, that we didn't have, like back when I was a teenager, let's say, it's not like we didn't have that kind of pressure to conform or to we didn't have expectations to deliver on our own and the society, the parents, the gardens, all that. But I just feel like generally now, the pressure is on. It's like you're living inside a pressure cooker, literally, for young people right now. And I want to talk about that a little bit. Like, have you encountered that a lot in your practice with young people? Do you feel like now generally people suffer from perfectionism more than what they did before? And how are young people right now dealing with that high, placing themselves on a higher pedestal, dealing with higher expectations, dealing with the need to do everything really well and to doing it all as well? I actually want to say that there's this need to also do everything and then doing everything really well. So there are two things over here that when we talk about the conversations around perfectionism, there are two things that are really being or that I've seen being triggered in young people right now. So yeah, how do you see that? How do you see that in your practice? How have you generally experienced it as well? If you want to share that, sure.
so yeah, so I suppose you mentioned earlier that I had another company. So yeah, I do co-found a CIC, which is a community interest company for young people and families. So it's something me and my business partner set up about 5 years ago. Um, And I think what you talk about the pressure cooker, I just think that today everything's just more exposed. So we're kind of encountering more information, more kind of situations, ways of being. And sometimes that can be overwhelming because, especially as a young person, and just as a person, 'cause I don't think it's just a young people thing. I think that it's a space of then just knowing how to navigate in that, and we're not taught it. We're not taught about how to learn ourselves, how to understand ourselves. So then when you see everything going on around you and it's so much more fast paced, you start comparing. You start looking at how you start looking for a way to be, and you're watching everyone else's results, and you don't necessarily see the journey behind everyone else's results. So you see what people are posting, you see how people are living, and you don't then see what's going on behind the door. You don't see like what's going on for them, how it's taken, what it's taken to get to where they are. And so then there's this expectation to be away without necessarily understanding that there's a journey that comes with that.
Yeah. Especially right now, I think the need to be successful in life
Yes.
is being expounded by the society and the kind of literally any profession that you're in, and any kid that you meet, they would have very, very high, and aspirations are good. I think they're very healthy part of challenges and
Yeah.
aspirations and inspiring, being inspired and aspiring towards something beautiful in life. I think that's one of the wonderful things about life. But it's the need to not fail at all to want to reach that level. And which is very counterintuitive, no? Don't you think so? Like, I mean, you're gonna fail and then succeed. Isn't that how
This is
the
the, but from when you're in school, you're not taught that it's okay to fail.
yeah.
You're not taught that failing is a part of um, achieving. It's not something that you kind of hear. You hear if you don't do well, then you're not you failed, and oh my gosh, it's not good enough. You're not the conversations that I had is like, okay, um, you wanted to get this, so next time this is what we have to do this. The conversations don't happen like that. So there is no teaching about failing. And it's not until you get to a certain bracket and you're around certain people, or maybe even paid to be in certain circles, where you're then going, when you have access to hearing someone talking about, actually, this is how I got to my success, and it was through failing how many times. I've only encountered that in the last maybe 6 years, 7 years, based on the growth of my business and stepping into different spaces, hearing people really talking about failing. And even, I suppose, actually, maybe 10 years, because I've been a therapist for 10 years. So through my study, I've been able to see that actually our failures are actually our biggest teachers. But we're not taught that. I was taught that in my mid 20s. But the crucial space to kind of learn that is when you're in school, when you're learning, when you first start your learning, knowing that it's okay to fail, it should be prominent in our teaching, but we're not taught that. You're taught if you don't get the mark, it's not good enough, or you're not going to get to this bit. There isn't any way real showing of plan Bs, and that actually on your journey, the goal might be there. This might be the goal, but it doesn't mean that you have to attain that goal. It just means that you're starting a journey, and on that journey, you might have to turn left because something didn't go that way, and that's okay. Because when you take the path of the journey, it's all the opportunities and all the learning experiences, which is actually the most prominent thing. It's the biggest thing on the journey. It's not necessarily the goal; it's the journey. Because on that
Definitely,
journey, you're going to learn so much. On that journey, you're going to learn so much about the world and yourself, and we're not taught that.
definitely.
And this is
And I,
where
I think
our
these are learning curves as well, right? So, for
yeah,
instance, when I was 10, what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be in life was very different to who I am right now. And
yeah,
if my
100%.
life, or if I hadn't tried out different things, if I hadn't failed at literally something that I wanted to do, because I wanted to initially go into the development sector, help people. Helping people was something that I wanted to do, that I was passionate about. Now, how I got there is very interesting because I got there through a very different, the path of psychology or the path of art, And that led me to do whatever I wanted to do in the first place. But I chose a very different channel in the end, which I was actually good at, which I actually enjoyed. So I think telling students right now that the outcome, you know, I feel like we take everything as a means to an outcome. Like the outcome is so important. And not to say that it isn't. It conforms in parts of our identity for sure. But I think the means to get to that outcome needs to be enjoyed more, needs to be more evident in our educational institutes, but are also just generally how we talk about certain topics like perfectionism, the need to be perfect. Also, I wanted to talk about how the need to be perfect, do you think it can be related, perfectionism, do you think can be related with the feeling of not being good enough? And how
Oh yeah.
how are they related to each other, and how perversely can they impact each other?
There's definitely a link to a degree. Everyone's individual, so everyone's reasoning and everyone's journey with it can stem from anywhere. But there is a link for some people. I will definitely say that. Not feeling good enough. It's an attachment made based on conditioning, because we're conditioned initially from communication. We're conditioned by our worth, by how the worth we see in others, so how other people see us, so our identity. So if we're not playing that part, we're doing that correctly, then we're not good enough. We're not getting it right, and then we strive for that. And the idea of not good enough is based on as well us magnifying the comparison of others. So the more we compare ourselves to others, the more we magnify our that we're not good enough. Because actually, you make yourself really small when you compare yourself. So everyone's got their light, everyone's got their like their greatness within them. The moment you look at someone else and think, oh, oh my God, I wish I looked like that, or I wish I could do that, or that kind of like mindset and that thought process that kind of stems through our minds, we make ourselves smaller. So then we then consistently think we're not good enough.
Mm.
Yeah. Actually,
Especially
it's just a
students who've had, or especially kids who've had parenting styles that centered around the comparison game or conditional, or them receiving conditional
yeah,
regard from their parents.
yeah.
When they did
Not
something
even just
like,
parents, and school as well. School, because we have to think about it. We have to look at it's not just parents that are in our children's lives. Like, I remember one of my daughters, she went to school and she was told something by her English teacher once, and from that, it changed the way she wouldn't even put pen to paper, and she was such a great writer. So it's not just parents, and because we could say, oh, parents, but we have to identify that just as individuals, we come in touch with young people, and we can then stem just the briefest comment can change how a child will see themselves. Just that moment, just that flying conversation we might have. So it's not just a parent thing, it's a people kind of contribution to this. And just as much as young people are at home, they're at school, they're in the education system. They come into contact with people constantly, and they are sponges. So just as much time, like if you look at COVID, when COVID happened, that's when you kind of see the ramifications of children not getting to have interactions with so many other people because they're just at home. So the outside communication and interactions does have an impact. So just as much as it's home, it's school, it's just everywhere. So any kind of comment we're making, we don't know what that's delivering and how it's being delivered to someone. So yeah, that condition and that kind of is definitely that positive regard. All of that comes from the
somewhere, exactly.
connections
And
that
I
we
think
have. Yeah,
communication is really important as well. I think that's a brilliant point. I also remember, you know, growing up, so I had this a lot of, I was really interested initially in art and then drawing.
mm,
And I remember the first time I actually drew something, like completed a proper picture, a drawing from a picture. And I showed it to my art teacher, and I think I was in 8th grade or 7th grade at the time. And she laughed it off as, oh, no, no, you can't have made this. You probably copied this. You're
yeah,
showing me somebody else's work. And she
yeah,
literally said this to me. And then she, as if it was a joke. And in her mind, And I guess the way she was putting it across was like, oh, laugh it
100%.
off and whatnot. And certainly that moment definitely deterred me from making anything for the next couple of years. And when I was in
100%.
my A levels, I did not pick part just because I was scared. So as a child, the child in me really took in that fear from her comment, which was very nonchalant, was just something that she just said.
Yeah.
But I definitely, kept it inside me for a few many years until I actually was able to grow out of it um, and create all these beautiful paintings that I have right now, and just
And
making
see,
out of it as well. Yes, so I think it's our outcomes and what we want is the same. Sometimes people want money, sometimes people want security, sometimes people want to just do something that they're really, really passionate about, like saving the world or ending world hunger. And that's all okay. There is no, we're not talking about any like judgment assigned to that. We're talking about how the means that you get to these things, the means that you get to these outcomes. What routes, what paths are you taking? So how can we kind of, when we talk about perfectionism, what can you say to make maybe parents more aware or teachers more aware or individuals who do incline towards perfectionist tendencies in their work? What would you say to them? Like I mean, we don't want to go into like what kind of maybe we can keep that for a different conversation for another day, because again, that would be like a very in-depth conversation on
100%.
how to
Yeah.
perfections. But what kind of suggestion or what kind of advice can you give to somebody who maybe suffers from perfectionism in their work, and yeah, and their work suffers as a result of it?
I would definitely sorry, you've asked kind of two questions. So the one about like the people that are surrounding others, I would definitely just look at um feedback is really important.
Mhm.
But it's also looking at sometimes our own self. When we're giving feedback, we have to look at where it's coming from. Sometimes, like I've spoken to some teachers and they'll want to give feedback, but it's based on their past and how they've heard things. And actually, it's not necessarily individualized for that person they're sitting with and how they need to hear it. So I think self-awareness within ourselves as parents, teachers, about why we're giving this feedback, and then looking at how does someone need to hear it? Because sometimes that kind of that's missing when we're giving support sometimes, or giving those kind of things. We're looking from our own lens and maybe our own past. So because of that, there's this passion to want someone to do better or do different, or do you know what I mean? And actually we need to look at, okay, it's my journey. So when I'm giving this person feedback, let me kind of look at how they might need to hear it. Because sometimes we need to look at ourselves a lot of the time when we're giving information. Because I know for parents, there's so much passion about you don't want your children to make the same mistakes as you. And because of that, when you're going in like, oh my gosh, like you should do better, like come on, you can do better. We're not necessarily coming from a place of we it's not that they can't do better. It's think about our own story and why we're saying that. That could be because you feel you should be doing better, or you should have done better. So it's just so that you'll be able to have a different conversation when you know where it's coming from, and
Yeah.
you're able to separate yourself when you're giving that feedback. And also it is just thinking about how is something heard, and asking someone as well, like checking that they've heard what your intention is,
Mhm.
because sometimes someone will we give this and we don't check, like, what have you heard, what did you hear what I've said, like, um are you okay with what was said? We don't ask that, because sometimes we might realize in that moment, actually, did you, like, just getting clarification, because we just assume people understand, and we can't, because
Yeah.
people can't understand and people can't see our intentions all the time
Also,
just by
sometimes
our
maybe
words.
they're not ready to take that feedback in as well.
This is it, and that's very true. But it is just like you said, your art teacher, for instance, if maybe she'd asked you what you understood by what she said, you might have said, oh, and she might have been, no, 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 this is what I mean. She might have been able to reformat it in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that wouldn't have been her intention to make you probably never want to pick up a um
Yeah.
like to do art. Do you know what I mean? So it's not that people are coming from horrible places or trying to be create that memory for us. We need to just check how someone's heard sometimes what we've said, especially when it's to do with feedback about them.
Mhm.
We need to sometimes just have that clarification. Have you understood where I'm coming from? There's just an assumption that people just understand and can see inside us, and they can't. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So yeah, I would say that. And I would just say, like, when you, I just want people to know, like, it's not that you have to look for confidence. I think there's this idea that you should just be able to do things. And it's the more you search for confidence and the confidence to be able to do something, the more you will keep stalling. Because confidence isn't something that you just have, it's a habit that develops and then you get confidence. So it's just that courage. I would tell people just to have courage to try, and it's okay. It's okay if it doesn't work the first time, because then there's another time. So it's just about looking for courage rather than confidence. I think people, the idea of perfectionism feels like you have to be a certain way. And if you're not this way, then it means that you failed or you haven't done right. And actually, no, it's not. It's okay. It's okay to get things wrong. It's okay um, that you're not confident, because you won't be confident. It's okay that you haven't tried something new, because think the idea of perfectionism means that it's funny because when people are trying to be perfectionists, they don't realize that actually it's okay not to know something. It's okay that you don't know something that you haven't done before.
Yeah.
So then you get wrapped up in yourself, but actually, no, this is a process of learning. And I think that's just something I would definitely say as a starting gap. It's just about having courage to try, courage that it's okay to fail, because you can get up and you can do it again, or you can change your path.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Michelle. That's actually really good advice. It's a really good way of looking at things as well. I also think that maybe understanding that everyone has a different timeline to experience things and to do things.
Yeah.
It's what's gonna be new for you maybe when you were 7 years old trying out something is probably something I'm gonna end up doing at maybe 10 years old or at 16, you know. There so the idea is to do things anyway, to be confident about your life journey and the circumstances that your life has made you face. I think it's so important to be confident about that, not to feel like a failure because of it. So
No,
definitely. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. And
no
I
problem.
hope we're
Thanks
gonna
for having
maybe
me.
do another session on how we can kind of deal with perfectionism, you know, if you and when you have the time, how, because
Yeah,
I feel
sure.
like that's just a more in-depth conversation that I
Amazing.
generally, because I work with a lot of students, I work with a lot of younger kids right now, and it's so heartwarming. It's so nice to be able to guide and help young people right now, because they're our future. Like, this is literally, they're gonna be the ones, they're gonna be the torchbearers to change so many practices, not just in mental health, but generally in our society, so many things that we do. So really, positive and really hopeful for that.